Today I want to talk about the danger of learning slang. What is the problem with learning slang and what might you be doing wrong? Now, this is a question I get asked all the time. People want to learn British slang, and that's a brilliant thing. Slang is an important part of language, but what's the real problem with learning it? Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to English Right Now. My name is Roy Woodhouse, and I'm your British English teacher, and in this lesson, we're going to talk about the potential dangers when learning slang. And this could apply to American slang, British slang, Australian slang, any slang. But of course, I'm talking about British slang because I am your British teacher. What British slang do you know? Do let me know in the comments. So let's get into the first thing first. Are slang and idioms different things? Yes, they are. Now, first of all, idioms are more fixed expressions which have a figurative meaning. A good example of this is the ball is in your court. A ball is something you can play a sport with. Court is where we play certain types of sport. So the ball is in your court sounds like it's some kind of reference to sport, for example, tennis, and that's possibly where it originated. However, these days we use the ball is in your court to mean the decision is yours to make. In other words, the onus is on you to make a choice or a decision. In other words, that has absolutely nothing to do with balls, courts, or sports of any kind. It's a figurative usage of the language, whereas slang is more of a word that means something else. It's a word which replaces another word. For example, knackered just means exhausted. Oh, I am knackered today. But I could also say I'm exhausted. That's an example of slang. However, the real difference we're going to talk about today is its stability in the language. Idioms tend to be more stable. They tend to stay in the language for much longer. Whereas slang, on the other hand, tends to be a bit more unstable. And that's the first thing we're going to talk about. Slang is unstable. And while some of it can be around for a long time in the language, there are examples of where they just come and leave very, very quickly. And that is the first major danger of learning slang. Major Danger. That sounds like a character from a comic book. Hello, I'm Major Danger. The first real danger when learning slang is that you learn something that potentially has already left the language, isn't as popular as some teachers may tell you it is, or it's not going to be around for a long time. So let's talk about that. Slang can be unstable. Now, when we talk about British slang, there are some classics. These are examples that have been around for a long, long time. Let me give you an example. Knackered, that was the one I used earlier on. Knackered has been around for my entire life. Younger people use it, older people use it. It is used by every age group. Knackered means exhausted. Another example, gutted means devastated or really, really sad. I've heard people of all ages using it. Likewise with cheers to mean thanks, everybody seems to use that. Mate to mean friend or just to refer to somebody in a friendly way, while others that seem to be around for a long, long time seem to be slightly dying out. For example, chinwag. I still use chinwag to mean a conversation, but it's not as common as it once was, and I don't tend to hear younger people use it. So, first of all, my recommendation when learning British slang, American slang, it's important to focus on the words, the slang expressions that have been around in the language for a long, long time, and they are still in use. We're going to talk about how you can find out which ones these are a little bit later on in this lesson. Please do let me know your favourite British slang in the comments below. But this is the interesting thing about slang. Some of them stick with us. They enter the language and they just stay in a kind of permanent existence in the language. They come in, everybody starts to use them, and they stick around for a long, long time. Now, I'm not going to say they're going to be there forever. There are some words that I use today, for example, knackered, that maybe in 50 years, nobody uses anymore. I don't know. I can't predict the future. There are some slang expressions that come and go, and it could be a very short period of time. I remember expressions like sheeple, which seemed to just really appear out of nowhere and then kind of left. Some tend to stay around a lot longer. For example, the expression woke seems to have arrived and been present in the language for quite some time, and it seems to be stable in the sense that it could stay for a good few years, or whoever knows how long it could be still used in 50 to 60 years' time. And some slang expressions, they come, they go, they seem to disappear out of the language and then resurface like some kind of monster in a film. They come back from the dead. So why does this happen with slang? Well, slang is very, very linked to generations. For example, you have Generation X, you have Millennials, you have Generation Z, and now you have Generation Alpha. And yes, I know I said Generation Z. Z is technically the name of the letter in my language, but I'm kind of conflicted on this one because Generation Z sounds a bit better when we say Gen Z. So we'll stick with that. We'll go with the American use of the letter Z. So let's talk about 90s British slang. This would be used by millennials. Now, there were words such as munter. A munter was used to describe a very ugly person. He's an absolute munter. This word, to be honest, no longer gets used. This was very much stuck in that time. Now, anybody from the 90s would probably recognize that word. If I said it to some friends right now who were born in the 80s and grew up in the 90s, and I said, oh, he's an absolute munter, that they were British, they would understand that British slang instantly. However, kids these days aren't as likely to use it. They may do, I may be wrong, but as far as I'm aware, it is kind of dying out. And when we die, those expressions will probably go with us. Another common one in the 90s was talk to the hand. Talk to the hand meant I'm not listening, because the full expression was talk to the hand because the face ain't listening, or talk to the hand because the face ain't listening. In other words, I'm not going to listen to you. It's like talk to the hand. This one, I never hear anymore. It was very much of that generation. It has gone. So if I heard some kind of 17-year-old use it these days, it would sound very, very weird. It has died and gone with the 90s. Likewise with a word like rad, which meant cool, that's a rad idea, that's gone. Maybe you might hear it a little bit. But if you were excited by something in the 90s, you could say schwing, which was a reference to several films, and everybody kind of got it. If you said it these days, probably nobody would really understand other than somebody that grew up in that generation. These terms, while some of them have been and gone, will still be understood by people that were from that generation. However, younger people won't understand it as easily. Now, interestingly, an expression like sick meant cool, that's a sick idea, or that's a great idea, or that is sick. Sick doesn't sound overly positive, but as slang terms in the 90s, it meant something good. That is a sick video game. This I very rarely hear because, to be honest, it sounds a bit weird for a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old to be using it these days. And also the younger generations have different words. So sick is dead, whereas something like wicked started appearing in the 90s. It also meant cool, that's a wicked idea. I had a wicked day out. This one seems to have stayed around for a little bit longer. It seems to have become more embedded in the language. Maybe it will die in a few years. Who knows? Only time will tell. But the simple point is, a vast majority of 90s slang is gone. It has disappeared and will only be understood as a kind of joke or a humorous reference to the past, whereas maybe a few words have stuck with us. So effectively, due to the unstable nature of slang, if you learn certain words without a method or without a strategy, you could end up learning words that aren't really appropriate, aren't really used, or just kind of linger around for humorous purposes within a certain generation. That is a danger. However, there is more. So now let's talk about the difference between me and Gen Z slang. Now, Gen Z, probably of making this video, most of them around their late teens or early 20s, and they're using terms such as slay means killing it, or it's a form of high praise. For example, that film slays. It basically means it's absolutely amazing. Stan refers to an obsessive fan, while cap can be a lie. No cap. And slaps means something is amazing or excellent. For example, that film that I said slays, it also slaps. I imagine that if anybody in their 20s or late teens is watching this video, they're probably going to cringe seeing a man who looks like me, of my age, using a lot of these slang terms. It sounds like I'm trying to be down with the kids. It sounds like I'm trying to be cool. It sounds like I'm trying to be something that I'm not. I am not a teenager, sadly. Although sometimes I think I am. The simple truth is, using terms that I've just used, that Gen Z slang, makes me sound a bit unusual because it's not really expected to come out of my mouth. I have a friend who has a child from that generation, and when he tries to use those kind of cool terms, those, youthful terms, his kids just say, "Dad, that's not really cool. Dad, that's not appropriate. Dad, you can't say that." In other words, what we need to learn is that some slang is very linked to a generation, and if you are from a different generation, it's going to sound unnatural. And thereby hangs a big problem. If you come from another language and you are of a certain age group and you learn Gen Z slang, that's fine, because you can understand it. You can learn what the people are talking about on the internet. But I wouldn't recommend you use it because it would sound a bit weird. Now, if we compare that to clothing, we all know what I mean by this statement. There are some items of clothing that are age appropriate. And when somebody wears clothing that is not from their age group, for example, somebody young could wear clothes that make them look much, much older, that doesn't look quite right, and vice versa. We often get quite critical of that, like, he's dressing like he's 20, but he's actually 65. You know exactly what I mean. So slang and clothes have that kind of really weird link. And it sounds a bit strange when somebody who is from an older generation starts using Gen Z slang. Now, there is a funny viral trend at the moment going around the internet where people of an older generation are using Gen Z slang for kind of marketing or purposes of humor. But it is funny for a reason, because it is not necessarily normal. And likewise, my son is Generation Alpha. He's not currently creating his own slang, but he will do. And when he gets to the age of around 15, 16, 17, 18, he's going to be using words that will just sound very, very weird coming out of my mouth. I'm going to learn new slang terms from my son. I'll probably make a video about it, and he'll say, "Dad, don't say that. It's not normal." Slang is linked to a generation, so you need to learn the right kind of slang. And likewise, some slang is very much linked to specific cultures or specific groups of society, and it may sound inappropriate for you to use a term that comes from those cultures. So what is the correct slang to learn? Well, first of all, I would start with timeless slang, those ones that have been in the language for a very long time, and they are more stable than current generational slang or previous generational slang. The next thing I would move on to is appropriate slang for you to be using within your life. Now, I'm not going to tell you what is appropriate or what is not, but I would recommend you use your judgment that if you are somebody of a certain age group and you're not a 17-year-old kid, maybe some of the Gen Z slang might be something to be missed. And how can we really decide which ones are the appropriate slang? Well, the first thing I would say is watch TV shows, watch films, and get a good idea. Also, listen to podcasts. This is a great idea to listen for more modern slang and really sort of analyze who's using it and whether they kind of fit in with your personality type as well. For example, if you see somebody of a similar age group, a similar background, using a slang term, you might want to make a note of it because it's probably something you could use too, unless they've started using skibbity at the age of 70. Likewise, avoid those viral videos if you really want to learn slang, because they're using Gen Z slang for a reason. So watching films and TV shows and making notes, and it needs to be current, contemporary, with a setting in the modern day. For example, you're not really going to learn any new slang from Downton Abbey or probably The Crown. So watching something set now in this current era and looking for the appropriate slang. The other way, of course, is to read a book, read books on slang, or indeed take a course and make sure that that teacher not only knows the classic slang, but make sure they teach you in a way that you can really, really learn. For example, if they are going to teach you Gen Z slang and let you go on your way and you're maybe from a millennial generation, then that may not be the perfect course for you. But it's always very interesting to have modules on Gen Z slang, Gen X slang, and 90s slang. And especially somebody like me, I can take a trip down memory lane to visit the 90s slang that no longer gets used. Gosh. And if you want a great example of this, I've made a video all about Victorian slang that's no longer with us, but I absolutely love. These are classic examples that I kind of wish were still in the language. I can't say that for many of the 90s slang terms that I remember. But these Victorian terms are absolutely brilliant. I suggest you check them out, and maybe we should start using them again. Have a great day.